This is probably one of the hardest ones to approach, I would say, because the kind of motivation that you feel to do anything when you're in a depressive state is next to zero. It can be so hard just to even make the next move, even just to start to come out of that place. And for a lot of us, we have this different way around of doing it. We try to like push ourselves out of it, and that's actually what I find with a lot of what we do with our emotional world. So we'll try to kind of force ourselves away from the emotion first, and sometimes that can be necessary. Like sometimes there are things that you kind of got to do and then you just shelve it and come back to it later. But in my experience, what I notice a lot is that connection before correction is the solution to so many things, and because it's that connection that actually transforms. I have experience with this and how terrifying it can feel when you have things to do but you just feel so little motivation, such a visceral sense of shutdown in the body. So my experience with it has been going on meditation retreats and just sitting with these feelings and having these feelings of intense, almost suicidal feelings of feeling like I don't know how I'm going to go on, and then but sitting with it, and in not actually that long a time these things just transform on their own. I remember finding a place in one of my Vipassana courses where I was able to feel this sense of intense sadness, like real sadness, and at the same time an intense sense of love. Like it was this feeling of beauty somehow was running parallel to this feeling of sadness. And that's not always something that has been available to me, but to know that that experience is there available, that sadness doesn't necessarily have to mean you don't have to kind of push yourself away from yourself when you feel sad, or when you're experiencing something like grief or loss or any powerful emotion. And what I've noticed working with clients is that depression can also have its origins in things like anger. So if you've been very, very angry but suppressed that anger, that kind of vital, life-defending energy, and there's a sense that it wasn't safe to express the anger, it wasn't safe to kind of give it a body, give it an expression, or let it be itself, then there will be a disconnect from that and a suppression. And that's how I like to think about depression myself, is disconnection and suppression. Depression. And in order to be able to work with some of these feelings, we actually have to go into them first. And for a lot of people, that feels like a really terrifying place, because you're so helpless when you're there. You know, you have this real sense of, I can't do anything. And what that tends to represent is this complete shutdown. And of course, we'll medicate that away and just and numb it. And sometimes that is a good solution in the short term if needs must, you know, and you have to like actually do things. But until you're actually being with those feelings and processing them, that's maybe always going to come back. This is not a replacement for medical advice with any of these videos. If you're experiencing something really severe, you should definitely go and have that as an option. But these are just more supplementary things that can help you connect in and start to move things through a little bit on your own. What you can expect then sometimes as you come out of depression is this liberation of feelings of like anger and maybe even fear. This has at least been my experience, and when I've worked with people, as they start to come out of that shutdown, what starts to happen is they experience these feelings of maybe fear or anger, or things start to rise, and it's like you're working your way up and back through the ladder there of nervous system responses that maybe got shut down. It's like if it got shut down when it was young, it wasn't safe to express these feelings. Your body then protected you by shutting all of that down. It's like, okay, survival is key here. We need to close this off, because if we start expressing it, it appears that this expression is not welcome. We're going to be further punished, further pushed away from the tribe, which is going to result in death. So your body's actually trying to protect you by shutting these things down, and having that as a base understanding doesn't necessarily make it easier to feel, but it gives it a context and it gives it a place to put your feelings, which can often help ease some of the tension around them. Because something that often a lot of people experience is this feeling of guilt and shame around depression, particularly if it appears like on the surface there's nothing wrong. Like there's nothing actually happening to me, so why do I feel this way? And so there's a layer of guilt and shame, which is further suppression, further shutdown, further compression of these feelings. So I have to further push down these feelings of push down feelings in order to be acceptable again for the people around me, so I can get access to the love that I actually need in order to get this thing moved through. So oftentimes that can be really pernicious. It's a very logical response by the body, but it can really hinder our ability to connect with the feelings, and like it stops us from dealing with what's here right now. It's like it doesn't necessarily matter where it came from. That's not the first port of call. The first port of call is, what does it need? You know, what do I need right now? And typically that is connection. Okay, I'm feeling disconnected, I'm feeling shut down, I'm feeling numb. So I need to settle here for a moment and start to feel that and start to check in with what's there. And that numbness, that disconnection, that feeling of sadness, all of the thoughts that come along with that, like the thoughts when you're in a state of shutdown tend to be very apocalyptic. Things like, I'll never be able to, I can't, it's never going to get better. Things of the flavor of I can't or it can't. It's like, no. And then there's a real sense of, well, what's the point? And then apathy might come along with that. If you're in this kind of high tone of super anxious, super angry, it's like more like, I need to do something. Am I going to move towards it? Am I going to move away from it? I don't know, but I need to do one of those two things. But when you're in this state of depression, it often feels like I just can't, there's just not enough in me, and then sadness and all of these other things that might be in there. So we're going to have a little look at some of this today. The first thing I want you to notice, if you're experiencing something like this, find where it feels congruent and appropriate to put your hand. What would be the most kind of gentle, connective way to approach the body in a place like this when you're in that super shutdown mode, that super shutdown place? This is why I tend to do this a lot when I'm starting out, is just putting a hand on the chest and a hand on the belly. It's like, I'm here. I'm not just here, I'm actually here, and I'm here as well. And even that in itself can start to bring a little bit of relief. And once we start to tune into that, you might notice that depression in itself has a particular breathing pattern. So what I want you to do is to start to exaggerate that breathing pattern. And typically with depression, it's very shallow. There's not a lot going on. So I want you to make that breath even softer. We're not going to try and force our way out of it. We're actually going to sink into it a little bit further. And relax the muscles of the face as you do so. This can be a great way just to help center and settle. And you might notice there is potentially a elevated heart rate as well. So it's like you're burning a lot of energy with this anxiety of, oh, it's not safe to feel this. And at the same time, this kind of big block, this big stop that's saying, no, I'm going to shut everything down. So just noticing what that's like to be there in that place without going up to the mind to make a judgment about it or a story about it. And that's typically, whenever we're entering the judgment space, that's typically the mind looking for safety. It's like, if I know what it is, if I can put it in a box and categorize it well, then at least maybe I can feel safe. And what we're going to do is just pull back from that, just refrain from making a story about it. And maybe there's a story there, that's fine. You don't have to interfere with that story. You can just watch it. You can relax the muscles of the face. You can relax the breath. And just feel what is going on there in the body. Being willing and open to connect with the experience that you're having right now in the body. As a body, there might be other things there as well. There might be little bits of discomfort, frustration, whatever's there, just on the level of physical sensation, without jumping into the narrative and being pulled along, threaded by that narrative. It's like, well, just stay with the level of physical sensation. And sometimes when you're in these very deeply depressive states, and this can be quite useful also, is you take a hand and you put it under the left armpit, the right hand under the left, and then the left arm on the shoulder like that. And it's just this nice holding position, this kind of self-care. It's like, okay, I've got myself here. And there are all these things, all of these little body-based things that we see people do all the time. For instance, when you see particular potent images maybe of people in mental institutions kind of rocking back and forth like this, it's like all of this is the body's attempt to self-soothe. And so all we're doing is making what's there conscious. Okay, I want to hold myself properly. I want to let myself move a little bit. I'm not going to force anything. I'm just going to let it come naturally. Let my body feel what it needs to feel and be here. And you might actually find that being on the ground for this has worked quite well for me in the past, that lying with your back flat on the ground, that's often what depression can feel like. It's kind of like death. I'm just done. There's nothing left in me. I can't. So lying with your back on the ground can also help with this as well. And just starting to naturally tune into what movements feel intuitively right for you. Nothing forced, nothing major, but the smallest possible thing that you could do. I'm just going to break it down. Notice where the breath is, keep noticing where the breath is, and when it feels right for you, we're going to breathe in and then breathe out and hold the breath. Breathe out all the way and hold the breath. Hold it until you can start to feel some kind of energy mobilize. And you keep holding it, and then eventually your body might want to breathe in again. Okay? So we're just going into and towards and bringing that feeling of shutdown a little bit closer. And it's safe to do that. It's safe to do so. And reassure your system that we're here right now. And it's safe to address this at this moment. Assuming you're in a comfortable position and not driving or operating any heavy machinery or holding anything precious. If you're just there in your room or wherever it is you are, just sit with this for the moment, and we'll do another retention. So breathing in, very softly, very gently breathing out, holding, holding a little bit beyond what feels comfortable, but not pushing yourself too far, just until you get that natural urge. Okay, bringing it back in. And you can do this as many times as you like. You can slowly start to feel the boundary of the skin. And if there's any movements that I'm doing that don't feel congruent for you, listen to what your body's telling you and go with what's congruent for it. And gently, you can let the yawns come if they need to come. So we're just getting in touch with the body to just gently release some of this survival stress. Like gently take the lid off some of that survival stress that might have been pushed down, compacted and suppressed. And maybe we have all kinds of really helpful stories like makes me a bad person, and we get threaded by those narratives so easily. Sometimes we tend to operate mostly up here culturally at the moment, we're led by this rather than this whole organic experience that's happening below the neck. So we're just starting to kind of plug back into that, because there's all this power there. There's like everything else is happening here. All of the parts of life are happening here. And if we can start to make this a little bit more of a priority, okay, I really need to understand and feel what I feel and connect with my own experience of my body right now, and start to feel safe to do so I can start to process some of these emotions. Just sit with them, let them transform on their own. Like, the body knows what it's doing. It does so many things on its own without any help from us, without us interfering. And in fact, sometimes the more we interfere, the less helpful it becomes. So just noticing all of the narratives that might be coming up from this, and allowing enough space for them, as if they were a stream of consciousness, stream of thoughts moving through a valley. And we often get so absorbed by the stream, and it can tumble us around and take us on this really intense voyage. While we're in the stream, it's the most important thing that's going on. And then we start to step out of the stream, and you can just actually watch it go by. You don't need to grab onto every single thing that is there. Really, the thoughts are just placeholders for feelings. It's like we're stringing out these narratives. We want to be able to feel what each thought has to offer us. Well, like, what's it actually trying to tell us on the level of sensation, on the level of reality, rather than in the symbolic realm of the kind of the story about reality. So I'm feeling more drawn to put my fingers just here in the solar plexus. It gives me the idea to yawn. Just gently sinking into the body experience. Maybe you can try experimenting with breathing in different ways that feel natural and feel intuitive to you in this state right now. And you might have to do this several times. And you might have to spend a little bit of time with your body, connecting with it, following it rather than directing it from the top down, but just listening to it, letting it come up with everything it needs to tell you, and letting it direct you and tell you what it needs from you. Okay, I need to clear some space right now. Sit with this, and it's okay if I do it imperfectly. It's okay if I don't do it all at once. All of that stuff, but I do need some kind of connection, however small that might be in the moment, even if that's just me sitting down, noticing my breath, noticing where the boundary of my skin is, noticing where my seat bones are positioned on the chair, or maybe where the points of contact with my skin, if I'm lying on the floor, like noticing what that feels like, just noticing this whole body experience. And it could be that it's numb, that's okay too. It could be that it takes a little while to tune into what's actually going on in the body. If the body or the brain's protected us from feeling this intensity of feeling by going numb, by dissociating, like, all of that's okay. That's quite normal. You don't need to rush it, you don't need to force it. You're just noticing, you're just spending a bit of time relaxing into the experience as much as you're able to do. And that is just the practice, really. It's just showing up to do that with some degree of discipline, with some degree of, okay, I need to remember to connect. I need to form this new pathway, build this entrainment that, okay, when I feel something that feels really heavy, my go-to might be to shame, suppress, caffeinate, drug, whatever. But I'm missing out on all of this vital information that my body's trying to give me. So I need to just practice building a new brain, building a new entrainment, a new pathway that says, when I feel like this, I need to slow things down and notice what I'm feeling, because it's going to keep coming back up, getting louder and louder and louder until we actually start to pay attention to it. You just can't push it away forever. You're always going to be on the run. And that's why life feels like it's a continuous treadmill sometimes, just always on the escape from feelings. It's like, well, you can slow that down, and it's okay to do that. all these reminders again and again. You know, years and years of doing this work, and it's like it just starts to build itself into who you are. I can slow down. It's safe to slow down and feel the tempo and the pace of my experience, whether that's a high tempo or a low tempo, whether that's kind of anxious. I don't necessarily need to buy into the thoughts, but I can listen to them deeply. I can listen to the space between the tone, the tempo, the pace, the cadence, the pitch, all of those things really important. What do they have to tell me? Is it real? Is it relevant? I'm listening, but I'm not going to react on them. I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond with connection. I'm going to respond with deep listening, deeper than just taking them at face value. I'm going to understand where they come from, where they originated, what kind of brings them here at this moment, without being reactive to them, but more responsive. And that's when we start to develop a little bit of agency and autonomy with our own systems, being able to direct it. So whenever you feel ready, we'll start tapping around the chest. And remember to breathe as feels appropriate for you. That could still be slowing the breath right down and even going into retention sometimes, or that could be having a slightly more intense breathing at certain times. But remember, we're not trying to force anything, we're just making the unconscious conscious. All this depression, all these really low, slow feelings, so difficult. I feel so helpless. I feel like I can't do anything. And what's worse, there might not even be a valid reason. So then I start to feel guilty and ashamed. I shouldn't be feeling this way. That's what my mind thinks. I have no reason to be feeling this way. I should just get on with it and power through. I should reject my body and push forward regardless. Because life's not going to stop. And I need to keep going. I've got things to do. Things to do that are more important than connecting with what's happening right here, right now. And part of that might even be true. Sometimes there are needs that are urgent. And it certainly feels that way in life. But I'm also open to listening to what's going on in the body. Because I know if I keep putting this off, the consequences further down the line are probably going to be way worse. So that might mean I need to be willing to feel some discomfort. I need to be willing to sit with my own feelings. I need to be willing to build an understanding and show myself a bit of warmth. That my body's trying to protect me in the best way that it can. And as I start to show a little bit of understanding, maybe some of this survival stress can start to release. And I would really love that. I would really love to get beneath this shutdown. So I can stay with it and allow it to release itself. Through my system. Because I don't want to keep carrying this forever. I don't want to constantly feel like I have to keep running away from my own body. Like I have to keep running away from what's happening inside me. It's so tiring. It takes up so much energy. It's just exhausting. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm on an endless treadmill. So I might be willing to have the courage to connect with what's happening right here, right now. And perhaps rather than chastising myself, I could actually encourage myself. Make a conscious choice to do that. To endow myself with courage. And connect first. And let the strength and power of connection move me from trying to force my way to actually feeling what real power feels like. I want my power back. I want to feel powerful again. I want to feel capable. I want to feel like I can do things. But I can't do any of that while my body's still carrying all this survival stress. And nothing feels safe. So I want to be willing to slow down and connect with what's right here, right now. Because that's the power that I actually have. I can at any moment choose to stop. And start to connect. And that might be really uncomfortable at first. And I might feel frustrated about that. And then I might go back into loops about what a terrible person that makes me and how I should feel ashamed. And all of these other survival mechanisms that are trying to get my need for love met by making me small and non-threatening. So the people around me will accept me. maybe it often feels like there's nothing I can do. And the thoughts that are coming from the survival stress, any thoughts of the nature of I can't, plus any of the other thoughts of the nature of I need to, those two energies pulling in different directions within the same body. It's like having my foot on the gas and foot on the brake at the same time. God, that was so tiring. No wonder I'm stressed. No wonder I'm depressed. No wonder I have no energy. My body is so overloaded with survival stress. Sounds like an emergency bell. Maybe it's time for me to slow down. Maybe it's time for me to address this now. Maybe it's time for me to take a very, very small step. Completely imperfectly. Towards slowing down and connecting with what's here right now. Maybe it's time to let my depression breathe. Maybe it's time to let it breathe exactly how it would breathe, without trying to push it around, without trying to bully it, without trying to force it. And maybe it will reveal something. Maybe I might start to notice that beneath it is other feelings, other more intense feelings. I'm willing to make those okay too. And maintain my connection to self. And not check out. Not jump ship. But sit with them just a little bit longer. I might be able to do this. You can sit with them just a little bit longer. I might be able to outlast this. And all those thoughts that are telling me that I can't, that's just more survival stress. I can sit with those too. I'm tougher than I think. Maybe I'm tougher than I think. And maybe that would be a really useful thing to know right now. I've been through so much. And even though it might not make logical sense right now, my body needs me. And so I'm willing to show up in whatever capacity I can. To be able to respond to my body. Take that responsibility and say yes to it. And commit to it right here, right now. That even though I learned that self-abandonment was a good survival strategy, I'm not small anymore. I'm bigger than I used to be. I'm more capable than I have been. And I might just be able to handle this too. Willing to let some things go. Willing to let go of perfection. And willing to be right here, right now. Oy. Notice what you notice in the body. Notice if there's anything that's shifted, and it could be that you need to go through these exercises as many times as you need, but it's worth it. Like, it's worth to start to understand a little bit about your body and understand a little bit about your system and why it brings you to these places, why it puts you in these states, because understanding is the antidote to judgment. And often judgment, while we'll think it's some form of understanding, is more of a impediment to actual genuine understanding, which is only really possible when you can place yourself right here, right now, listening to everything that's going on, listening to everything that's going on in the brain, listening to everything that's going on in the body, which at first might feel really overwhelming, but just gently relaxing and expanding your capacity to be able to hold what's here. And as you expand your capacities, you start to stretch yourself out just by being there, watching, observing, not reacting. You're starting to build a new muscle in your brain, and that stuff just starts to work itself out organically. So keep working on this stuff and notice the thoughts, notice the feelings, do whatever you can. It's hard. Depression is really hard. I get what's going on here. So I hope that's useful to you, and let me know in the comments any feedback or anything that you might want to say. I'll see you in the next video.